Yes.
Hey everybody, this is Dan McNevin with Snap. Thanks for joining us in this workshop. A couple of housekeeping issues. House cleaning. It's a COVID term, house cleaning. Actually, I've got a COVID question for you first before we start. Think about the one thing that you've gotten better at since the pandemic. The one thing that you've become best at, maybe, or improved the most at. For me, it is stacking my dishwasher. I can now really pack them in tight and get them clean in one setting. So that's my victory during the pandemic. I'll be moderating this session. Tim will be presenting. There's a chat button, and we hope that if you have questions, you'll send me a link, a question, a chat. I'll aggregate those questions, and then I'll feed them to Tim at the end of his presentation. I understand his presentation will be about, 30 minutes. Tim, for those of you who don't know, is our president, Snap's president. He has helped the Snap transition from the founding group into what it is now, which is a broad-based coalition. He cares about partnerships. He exemplifies that in how he works. And this actual workshop is really more about Tim's passion for organizing. So with that, I will ask Tim to take the screen and take over.
All right. Well, thanks very much, Dan. I appreciate the comments. As survivors, we confront the largest institution in the world as an individual with little power, unless we organize. So SNAP has been involved for over 30 years with 30,000 survivors and supporters. We have about 160 leaders. We're going to stress the basics of organizing, public advocacy, and mobilizing others. My name is Tim Lennon. I am the president of the board of directors of SNAP. I'm also the co-leader of the Tucson support group. And I've been involved in political and social organizing for over 50 years. So this is a workshop. I'm going to, at the end, welcome comments and questions. So I'll also refer you to my blog, which is Stand Up, Speak Up. We'll begin with a brief review of what some of the things we're going to cover. So primarily, it's going to be how are we going to help survivors? How are we going to make contact? How do we engage in the community? How do we build a peer network? We'll talk about 3 elements of a peer support group: reaching out to survivors, establishing a support group, and developing partners. And then, of course, a bit about going public. And I welcome your questions. So we have burning questions. So how do we reach those that are suffering in silence? The reason I say this is that we know, I was saying maybe 70% of victims of child sex abuse never come forward, but I heard Catherine Robb yesterday mention the statistic, I think 80 or 90%. So most people that have suffered, especially child sex abuse, but sex abuse in general, even as adults, never come forward. So the question is, how do we reach them? How do we get to them? And the other is, we're all part of a community. How do we engage and connect with our community? So organizing, most people think standing up or sending out 10,000 emails or standing in front of City Hall or trying to do some large demonstration or some large public event. And what I want to stress always at every point is if we help one survivor, we've changed the world. If we help one survivor, we've done a lifetime of work. And that we need to keep in focus that on that one survivor. There's even a biblical reference or analogy of finding the one lost sheep and leaving the 99 to the wilderness. We need to concentrate on helping, supporting that one survivor. And if we do that, we have accomplished a lifetime of good. So where do we start? So basically, we need to start with those closest to us. It's not about reaching out there, those over there. It's talking about those that we know, those that are closest to us. That means our family, our friends, our brothers, our sisters, and then reaching out a little bit further to your neighbors, coworkers, union brothers and sisters, social clubs. So you work from the center out. So it's like a pebble in a pond. We expand from the base. And again, we have to start from a social foundation that we can't go out as individuals, as lone rangers, but always start for where we are. So what gifts do we give to survivors? So when we reach out, when we make attempts to reach those that have been harmed and are suffering alone, we offer them respect, acknowledgement, patience, tolerance. And one element that is incredibly important is just listening. We work with a community that is vulnerable, unsure, scared, angry, and who may have many burdens, may be burdened by a lot of different kinds of issues. And by our participation, we can provide tremendous support. There's our founder, Barbara Blaine. This was taken at a demonstration in Dallas. We were in front of a church, and Barbara was very hands-on. And so organizing is everybody engages and jumps into doing the work. So, as I mentioned, starting with listening, because many times the only people.
Several other countries besides the United States. So enough about me. Let me
here's some background.
Start and give you the presentation. The title is "The Search for Answers: Interesting but not always helpful developments."
Dan, do you have your audio on?
Surfaced in 1983 and 1984.
No, I don't.
Tim, you're muted. We can't hear you. Better.
Thank you.
Okay. Seems like I was muted there. So, as I mentioned, one of the gifts we can give is listening to survivors. So how do we go from listening to helping, to engaging and organizing? So we can start out by listening, but one method is not to give advice or whatever, but to share our story of who we are, what our process was, and attempt to show how there is a path to healing, that we can give help to those that have been harmed. So it's incredibly important that people have hope. And as I have here on the screen is one conversation may be enough, not enough. In other words, is always attempt to see if you can schedule a future phone call or a meet for coffee. In other words, that people that are coming in that are unsure and scared may need some help in follow-up and continuation, because we always want to build trust with those that are stepping forward. So what is the core of organizing? And that is basically, it's one person, it's personal contact. Politicians call it retail politics, or fix the pothole. In other words, address the immediacy of the need and make that connection personally. That's always the first step in any kind of organizing. And that when we reach out is not to necessarily do it as an individual, kind of as a Lone Ranger kind of process, but to engage with the community. I'm not saying that very well. We'll address that in a minute. But just telling people things is insufficient. That the personal connection is important. And as I mentioned previously, sharing our stories. And we saw previously in the presentation of Terry McKinnon and Ann Barrett Doyle about racism and the importance and significance of diversity and racism and how that plays a part in our organization and in organizing. SNAP has been predominantly a white organization. And if we just continue on a process without an understanding, awareness, consciousness of who our audience is now and who we want to reach, we always need to be aware of that and make efforts to reach out, to not to be blind to other communities outside our immediate sphere. And we've seen this racism in incredible examples. And again, Terry brought out some examples in the Indian reservation, the resident schools, both in Catholic community and the Mormon community. And poverty can add to that in that communities that are vulnerable become victims because they are vulnerable by those that use power and authority to abuse them. So we need to be aware of that, as well as the language we use, the culture that we identify with, and how we form connections. So when we do organizing, organizing is basically a bottom-up kind of process where we reach out into the community, attempt to make links, and bring people to conversation, bring people to support groups. So to do organizing when you are reaching out is having a clarity of your mission, your objective, your goal. We need to avoid confusion, delay, disappointment. Again, we work with a community that may be vulnerable, may be unsteady, may be unsure, may be afraid, may be intimidated. So we have to make sure that we're aware of this when we do our advocacy, that we have some kind of clarity that clarity of what we're doing or what we're advocating for. So advocacy is kind of going from not so straightforward, but from the top down, in the sense of making sure that people know that you're there, that there's options, that there's opportunities for change. Just broadcasting something from the top down or from you to the community is different than reaching people, although the advocacy is an effective way of reaching. But we need to make those connections and bring them together. So what we've seen, and again, Terry and Ann have mentioned this, and other speakers in this conference have mentioned about the increased visibility and advocacy of many new organizations, many new initiatives and programs. And we've seen this in the survivor groups that arose out of Weinstein. We've seen the organizations arose out of the gymnasts and Dr. Nasser. Of course, we have the Boy Scouts, the male survivors, and of course, within our own community, not only the Catholic, but the Mormon, the Baptist, the Jehovah's, all of these different kind of survivor organizations are coming to the fore. And as we develop our advocacy, we have gained a tremendous amount of strength by building links and making connection with other organizations. And again, in a minute, I'll talk about statute of limitations and state investigations. But we know that the future of our movement is based on the success of building these connections and links. So how do we do that? Well, you know, locally, you may have Take Back the Night. Connect with them, connect with your local rape crisis center or your Coalition Against Sexual Abuse. Attend their events, invite them to SNAP events, connect with them on Facebook, both personally and as an organization. Retweet their posts that are appropriate. So again, it's a process of organizing. The more that we can develop these links, the more that we can bring forward those who have suffered sexual abuse and make the connection. And again, these collaborations can make our movement stronger and effective in changing laws, changing culture, and changing the language. So this was, I think this is on the back page of our program guide. And this graphic has been used at previous conferences, and most of these organizations were part of a effort, an initiative called All Survivors Stay, which I'll talk about in a minute. But we can see that there's 20 or so organizations there. And then recently we've seen the Me Too movement and the Survivors Agenda. And they recently, just a couple of days ago, finished their conference, and they've compiled a group of people as advocates. And we hope and made efforts to make links with them and with their effort, but just to know that there's many organizations in this movement. So there's a lot of resources. When you're reaching out, how are you going to connect with survivors? And that means reaching out to community centers, neighborhood groups, such as Nextdoor, therapists, maybe in sympathetic churches, the church newsletter, to notify of support groups or post a notice, that this can be ways to reach those, again, the vast majority who never come forward. So we want to reach these folks and bring them forward and give them support, and hopefully help them on their path to healing. Okay. So elements of organizing. As I mentioned before, we need to figure out what we want to accomplish. You can't give a message if you don't know of what we're trying to do. And of course, SNAP has a mission. It's been around for 30 years. It has a legacy. It has programs and initiatives. But we always need to be clear on, on the foundation of the work that we're doing, such as what our vision is. And the other is, which is incredibly important, is the audience, is attempt to make, to clarify who your audience is in any kind of work, and understanding, of course, what kind of need that we're going to address. And one of the benefits of SNAP is that we have a tremendous legacy, as I mentioned, and we have credibility and authority. And when we organize, we can speak as someone that has this credibility and authority and able to reach out. So when we organize, again, it's not a Lone Ranger kind of approach, is that we are part of a movement, we're part of an organization that has resources to help. So to get to a fundamental issue is if you're a SNAP survivor, if you're a supporter of SNAP and interested in becoming a SNAP leader, they should contact SNAP on our website or contact me, and we can begin the process of being a leader. If you're a leader now, that in establishing a meeting place, we need to ensure that it's public and it's safe. It needs to be easily accessible, that people may be coming from some distance so that there's an ability to get to it. And the other is we need to establish that it's private, that we're talking about very sensitive and private kind of issues, and we want to make sure that people have the comfort of knowing that there are that they are safe. Being safe is incredibly important. So, as I mentioned, we have resources. SNAP and ZAC and other office staff can support any kind of support group by posting a notice on the SNAP website, email local and regional survivors in your area. We can make connection with local sister organizations, as well as doing that locally. And the staff can help in establishing press statements, press announcement, support group announcements. Oh, you can't read the quote. So this is a Martin Luther King quote. Our challenge is not to organize, our challenge is to organize the power we already have in our midst. In other words, as an organization, as a network, we have the power, we just need to bring it forward. So in public statements, as I mentioned, we need to figure out what the goal, what the objective is, how we can support a survivor, raise awareness, call out a predator. So if a leader or a survivor wants to have some kind of public event, public press conference, the first thing to establish is what are you addressing? And the second is to gather the supporting information. In other words, we can't make accusations just on the fly. And that means that we need to document information and make a proposal that we can pass on to Zach, where you propose some talking points and work with Zach and the staff in producing a public announcement or a press statement or establishing the foundation of a press conference and what some of the things that we need to do. Also on the website, we have under resources, how to talk to the press. So there are, and that's also in the SNAP Leader Manual. And again, reaching out to local organizations is incredibly important. So resources for advocates. So SNAP, as a peer network of 30,000 people, it works, or its fundamental work is accomplished by the 160 local SNAP leaders. And here you have a tremendous amount of peer support, not only from other survivors, but from these leaders that, for instance, when I have issues that I've known other SNAP leaders have addressed, I'm comforted to know that I can contact them and find out how they addressed an issue, how they took action, what kind of initiatives they took in reaction to maybe holding some predator, outing some predator. And the other is our office, because we have 30 years of experience, we have tremendous resources as far as getting hold of media and making media contacts. So if there's an interest in doing public events or make an announcement of your local group, is you can get the SNAP office to help provide support. And again, this 30 years of experience is incredibly important for establishing authority and credibility. And because we have strong links and a strong history with media, we've encouraged by that. So these are two pictures from two different leaders meetings. For our leaders, twice a year, we have SNAP leaders meeting. One is at the annual conference, and one is at a leaders meeting in February, which may be in Tucson or Phoenix this coming late January, early February. But this is an opportunity for us to learn, to train, to give and receive mutual support. So there are resources. So SNAP as an organization relies on the work of other warriors who address the issue of clergy sexual abuse. We're just one subset of sexual abuse, which is ubiquitous or everywhere in our society. We are powerful and influential and effective within the clergy community in addressing this. We heard just recently, or just previous to this, the great work of Bishop Accountability. They maintain a database of all publicly known clergy abusers. And as we heard today, 7,000 are on the list right now. There's another organization, Child USA, which we'll describe in a minute, but they are wonderful advocates, and they have been the leader in advocating for reform of statute of limitation laws, and they're great. RAIN, Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network.org. They're the largest organization dealing with sexual abuse. They have a hotline, and they have a tremendous amount of resources, and they give help to all victims of sexual violence, and it's a great resource. Also, Child Help, which I don't have listed here, has a hotline as well. It's childhelp.org. And lastly, my blog, which is Stand Up, Speak Up. I have a number of resources on support for survivors, how to research abusers, how to find a therapist, a number of other kind of resources. And of course, our SNAP website, which has, as I mentioned in a previous slide, a tab for resources. Check that out for both survivors and for advocates. So public events. Public events are incredibly important for organizing. And I'll give you two examples. One example is I had buried my memories of being sexually abused when I was 12 years old for over 30 years. In San Francisco, I passed by a demonstration in front of the cathedral of people protesting, outing, holding accountable a clergy predator. And I was stunned or amazed that memories of my abuse began to emerge. And this was my start to being involved in SNAP support groups and becoming more aware of what happened to me in the past. Even though the memories were buried for 30 years, the effects of that abuse, of PTSD, still was impacting my life. The other example about public events and why they're so important is we saw recently in Bill Cosby, one actress came forward, and soon after 60 actresses came forward, or one gymnast stepped forward and 500 those abused by Dr. Nasser came forward. The Hollywood producer Weinstein, an actress stepped forward with that, and maybe 500 followed. There's many, many other kinds of things. And public events are great for raising consciousness too, because Tarana Burke in 2006, 2007 coined the hashtag #MeToo. In 2017, I think it was Alyssa Milano, an actress, gave that hashtag a prominence of Me Too, which led to an explosion of connections with tens of thousands of others that were sexually abused. So public events are incredibly important, that they can be a starting point of organizing. We saw even in the case of SNAP that the work of the Boston Globe Spotlight series, that when those articles came forward, tens of thousands of survivors came forward to SNAP in 2002 and 2003. So SNAP can be incredibly important as far as raising public awareness, demonstrating how widespread it is, and provide proof to when we do advocacy in front of state legislators or any kind of courtroom drama. So organizing that SNAP has done, we've done some really, really great national and state organizing. The most grand was that when the Pennsylvania Grand Jury Report was published in August 2018, SNAP immediately called for a grand jury or state investigation in every state. And as a result, 25 states are now doing investigations. And in Pennsylvania, that it outed a tremendous amount of people. And this has led to a dramatic increase in advocacy and has forced politicians to make changes, which has forced laws and statute of limitations. And we see that in the last couple of years. In fact, Catherine Robb's presentation yesterday talking about 30 states in the last year or two that have reformed their statute of limitation laws because of public advocacy. Child USA has been the leading advocate of this. SNAP has been a warrior in this campaign as well as many other organizations, but we have many SNAP leaders that have been incredibly effective in changing the law. And again, we have to remember the importance of statute of limitations is that, as Child USA said, it's the average age of a victim coming forward is 52. It's important that people not be robbed of justice because many of the previous laws ended the ability to achieve justice at age 21 or age 25. And again, some of my memories came forward at 43, and memories of the rape didn't come forward until I was 63, over 50 years later. So statute of limitations reform is incredibly important, and a element that SNAP continues to work on and continue to advocate for and organize for. We have another event. It's called All Survivors Day. There's a website, allsurvivorsday.org. We organized in 2018. We felt it was important that survivors have the ability to step forward, tell their story, to be their own voice, to demand respect, to acknowledge their abuse, not have outside forces define who they are. It's sort of like a celebration of us as survivors. And as I mentioned in the previous graphic, that is the end of, which is at the end of this conference program guide. This group of 25 organizations had 31 events and I think 6 different countries around the world. We also had a smaller version in 2019, and come October, in the next week or two, you'll be hearing more about this year's All Survivors Day and how we can bring the voice of survivors forward, dominate the conversation, make it our voice, and celebrate survivors. So there's the banner, Stand with Survivors. And this was a public event that we did in Pennsylvania. You can see the SNAP sign in the upper left. There was an attempt to reform the statute of limitations in Pennsylvania. That's an ongoing struggle, sadly and regretfully. So there's challenges. You know, we don't win everything. We keep struggling, but it's in the process, it's in the continual fight that we win. Even when we fail, we're building the foundation for future events and future power, future credibility, developing links with other allies, as well as I mentioned here on the screen, develop a contact list. In other words, find out more allies that are supportive and interested in the issue. And I have two stories. One is I was organizing an event, this was 40 years ago. Anyhow, a long time ago. It was around immigration. Immigration's still an issue. But it ended up, I was going to say there's going to be this mass protest and get to the protest. And there's maybe 10 of us, but there was probably 15 or 20 media people there. So I was more successful in organizing the media than I was in organizing advocates and supporters of the issue. So that can be a fail, but you know, it's teaching. And the other is that I, as well as probably other SNAP leaders, in fact, I know other SNAP leaders, when we established a press conference or press event, we have people that said they're going to make it and they don't, and you're the only person there. That happens, but again, it's just an ongoing process. We're putting our best effort forward, and sometimes I know one event I was the only one, but there was a story. It was very brief, but it did bring someone else forward that said basically me too. So there are challenges, there are wins. Oh, you can't see the name of this, but this is from Ella Baker. For those that are just listening, the quote is, "I have always thought what is needed is the development of people who are interested not in being leaders as much as developing leadership among other people." This is incredibly important. So if you're a SNAP leader, reach out and bring along a co-leader. If you know a survivor that's in your support group, bring them forward as a leader. Or if you are a SNAP survivor and want to step forward, there is an avenue and a path, and contact me or Zach or any of the other SNAP leaders, and we can begin to look at that. So this is kind of the conclusion here. So for any organizer, the whole idea is focus on helping one person. You know, we're not going to change, well, we are changing the world, and we're doing a wonderful job of changing the world. But as advocates, as survivors, help one victim. You know, I just think that is a lifetime of benefit to know that you help one person. And for that one person, that can be literally life-saving. And I can say SNAP has saved my life, and I can truly say SNAP saves my life every day. It's a way for me to fight back. So if we can help one person, that is a gift that we give to them, but I also believe that it gives a gift to us. So the other is, I just mentioned, bring victims forward to survivor to leader. Bring on survivors as co-leaders. For survivors in general, provide task and meeting and responsibility. If they have skills in media or if they have skills in fundraising, bring them forward, suggest that they do work either locally or nationally. And Gila Benchimal, who is one of our speakers, I think was on Friday. Yes, she was on Friday. Is an amazing researcher and a wonderful person. She has done research on what are the steps of becoming a leader and thriving, an advocate. And I'm sure she would welcome a call. I would always welcome a call. So reach out, ask people. People are not going to know. People are not going to step up. But if you ask them, you'll be surprised at how many will take up being a leader and seeing how that becoming a leader can help them fight back. Contact. This is my finish, which is contact me. You're welcome to contact me, or you can contact SNAP, and we can get you on any kind of road that you're looking for, or if you have questions or you want to follow up. And I appreciate this opportunity. I'm so happy about this conference, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Tim. There's a couple of questions. I have a couple of questions, and we have a snap line we have a chat line that's open, or we can even try to find a way to get people to get off of mute and ask their own questions. But the first one is, will your slides be available somehow to folks who either have watched this or who would want to watch it or see the slides in the future?
Yes. In fact, I have notes behind each slide, and my notes are not the cleanest, but yes, I can do both. Okay,
thanks. Tell us about the future of, given that we're in a pandemic, the future of support groups, how those are going to be rolled out and supported.
Well, one of the amazing things is that previous to the pandemic here in Tucson, since it's not a huge urban area, we opened up our support group to video conferencing maybe a year ago or way before the pandemic. And we found that the virtual support groups have been effective. And I did the support group for this conference on Friday, and we had 50-some people. And I was amazed at the ability of people to make connections and do the sharing. But another amazing thing is that because of the virtual nature of it and promoting the virtual, is we now have a number of national support groups. Previously, our support groups were located in urban centers, and people, if they lived nearby, could participate. And people out in the rural areas weren't. But with virtual support groups, we've seen that we've established a national support group for men, for women. There's some efforts to establish support groups by time zone. We have a number of different kinds of groups, not only within the traditional SNAP, but also Christian Orthodox, Mennonite, ritual abuse, abused as adults, abused by nuns. So we've seen families of those abused. So there's a lot of different support groups, and they've been surprised, maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but surprisingly effective. So the pandemic sort of put an accelerator on the whole thing of opening it up to all of the United States, not just the urban centers.
Thanks, Tim. There's a few questions here I need to sort through so that I can honor the group's questions. One of them is, there's a comment which is that without this virtual conference, this person could not have attended. And I say that's probably true for a lot. I believe that, and Zach can probably send me a note, I believe that we've maxed out this conference.
Yes.
500 or 600 people have joined us. It's a validating tool to have access and to actually be able to save money and still get the support and the insight. There's a question about safety and pushback. Are you familiar with any survivors coming forward who want to come out to a therapist, and if we don't have a therapist at a support group, if there's resistance to that? What's been your experience?
Well, I think the foundation of any support group is support. So I would say, if I'm understanding the question correctly, is, that it's a peer support group. In other words, when I do a support group as a co-leader, I don't come in as an expert. I don't come in as a therapist, an attorney, or anything. We're peer. And so we always need to keep that in mind when we participate in a support group. The second thing is, it's based on the foundation of self-help. In other words, we can hold hands, we can meet with people for coffee or engage with them in a support group. But in essence, it's the journey that they need to take. It's self-help. We can't solve problems, and the support group just hopefully provides that safe space for people to embark on their path to healing.
There's a question here about whether we have any physical collateral to put into a therapist's office or in a community center's foyer. Do we have physical brochures anymore? Or is
no,
it all
we haven't.
digital?
There's been discussion. As far as the therapist, there's a great resource. It's on my blog, standupspeakup.org. But you can go directly, and that is Psychology Today. And you go to their website, I guess psychologytoday.com, and they have a button there, I think even at the banner, find a therapist. And it's an amazing resources because you can sort by a number of different things, not only location, but man, female. You can say, what their specialty is. You find out how much their typical charges are, what their qualifications are, and that's a great resource. And of course, going to your local SNAP leader is always an important source. I found my therapist here in Tucson by chatting with my co-leader and saying, hey, can you recommend a therapist? So those are a start.
So let's just kind of zoom out for a minute and talk about the whole world. We have a SNAP group now in Japan. It's an outpost in the sense that it doesn't have the support that we have here in the United States with a lot of people. How do we help Japan grow and support advocacy in different countries and in different languages?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think the most important thing is as an individual, as I mentioned in my presentation, organizing as an individual is difficult. And one of the reasons that SNAP has been so successful is it's been doing it for 30 years, has a lot of experience, it has a lot of resources, has a lot of bodies to organize and develop. I know Harumi in Japan is making efforts to make contacts with other people and make connections and hopefully build a network, but it is slow going as an individual. One thing that we could do is if we have a generous survivor or generous participant here that says, okay, let's send a SNAP leader there to tour Japan. As I mentioned before about Nasser or Weinstein or Cosby, that when there's public notice, other survivors step forward. And the other example I'll give is Chris Longhurst in New Zealand. He came forward as a leader and has developed a network in New Zealand and has established himself as a nonprofit and has been very effective in organizing. So when there's a lot of resources available, it's easier to do. And when you have existing connections, it's easier to do. Harumi is in a culture that has little Catholic presence. And so she is much more difficult position than organizing in New Zealand or Italy or the United States.
Thanks for that. That's sort of a good big picture. There's a comment about, we are focused on priests so often, and that we have survivors of nuns and survivors of deacons and of lay religious teachers, and there's an appreciation that we are broadening the net to be more focused. There's a lot of data about priests. 7,000 priests are noted, and some nuns in the Bishop Accountability. But how do we continue to widen the net and support all these folks who have been victimized in a religious setting, even if it's not been by a priest, and keep them feeling as connected as they can be?
Well, right offhand, the most short answer is participating in a SNAP support group, for instance. We don't check IDs at the door. SNAP has always welcomed those abused by other kind of clergy or other church-related kind of facilities. And we welcome families of those sexually abused as well. We know that the trauma of a victim is also the trauma of the family, the parents, the siblings. And support groups are an effective way to do that. And the other, as I mentioned in the presentation, is that as we develop as a survivor movement, as we make more connections with Darkness to Light or RAIN or Child USA or Child Help or Male Survivor, any of these other organizations, the more that we can develop links, the more that we can support each other, that we're not just one organization. It's not just a clergy abuse problem. And I think Terry McKinnon in his Bishop Accountability said, you know, we're a subset. So it's not like we need to narrowly focus.
Thank you for that. We have about 5 minutes, Tim, so we'll take a couple more questions. One question is from a member here. He has a friend who's afraid to come forward because he fears the wrath of the Roman Catholic Church. How do we and how does he support that sort of fear?
Well, I would say, like the pebble in the pond analogy, is establish those a connection with those closest to you, engage with those closest to you. And I think this is incredibly important to establish links with your family and with your friends, that they know and that they can provide support. I see my healing as part of 3 different elements. One is family support. The other is professional therapy. And the third is SNAP. So engage your family, engage your friends, those that are closest to you. I'd say start there, and definitely engage with a professional. They can help in ways that no other can. And SNAP support groups are incredible as far as understanding that what happened to me happens to many others, that I'm not alone. And one last thing is, survivors movement is winning. In other words, we dominate the conversation.
And we're on the right side of history. And that really is a good way to get to the last question, which is, in the next year, between this virtual conference and next year, whether it's virtual or live or both, what do you want to see happen with SNAP and with the movement?
Well, I think my biggest objective is to develop links with other organizations, because I believe that's going to help us change the laws, change the culture, change the language. In other words, like it's not just a matter of changing laws, that we need to also change the culture that we live in. You know, victim shaming, for instance, what she wore, how late she stayed up. You know, why didn't you fight back? Men get this. Why didn't you fight back? And how we do the language is, you know, a relationship of a 30-year-old man with a 14-year-old girl. It's not a relationship, it's child rape. So we need to change the language, change the culture. And the more that we develop these links, the more that we're going to be able to step forward free and feel safe, protect and prevent future abuse.
Hey, Tim, there's a request that if you can stop sharing your screen, then we'll see you in the full screen. And you're such a good looking guy. We want to see all of you. You've been working out, right? You got some pretty big muscles we can look at.
Let me see. Oh no.
Well, we're getting to the end of it. So maybe next year we'll have this really wired. Hey,
No. Let me do. I can't.
You want to get this done, huh?
Yeah.
I think we just lost you entirely.
Oh,
There you are.
there I am.
Fantastic. Okay. He's got those beautiful rugs in the back.
Yeah, Navajo rugs. They're both they're each about 100 years old.
Okay, so they're nearly as old as you are. Got it. I can say that because I know Tim.
That's fine. That's
So
fine.
if there are no other questions, I want to thank Tim for the effort in putting this presentation together. I hope that I didn't miss any questions. I might have. There's a lot on the board here, and I was trying to drink coffee and read at the same time, and that's hard for me. There's a lot of good work that SNAP is doing, and Tim, as a leader, we appreciate that you're at the head of the line, getting hit every day. And I want to thank all those who joined our workshop, and let's keep on keeping on. God bless.
All right. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I think it's over.